Good evening, guys, and welcome to another episode of Midweek Mixup. And this week we have an awesome special guest straight from Xbox here, and that is Senior Hardware Director David Prien. I hope I've pronounced that correctly as well, by the way.
It's close. It's Prien, but it's okay.
Prien, okay.
Prien.
Awesome stuff. Well, it's awesome to have you here, and thank you for the time. And again, following the little bit of a daylight saving time mix-up that we've had just before the show there. Reorganizing things and continuing on. Awesome to have you here. How are you doing today anyway? What you've been up to?
Doing great. You know, I mean, here in the US it's still work day, so this is my lunchtime, but you know, it's worth it to be on here. It's fun. Can't wait. Sounds exciting.
Awesome stuff, brother. Awesome stuff. You had much time to get any gaming in, or has you been very focused on certain hardware aspects and meetings and things like that at the moment?
Well, I'm not going to lie, since, you know, there was this issue where I thought we were starting out earlier, so somehow my schedule cleared up for 45 minutes, so I was literally right in the middle of a when I called in, I was actually right in the middle of a D2 strike, and so it's still sitting on the screen, so I'll probably die here in a second, but hopefully people will just pull me through and I'll get some points for it.
Awesome. I think there's a lot of the execs love Destiny 2 as well. That's quite a few of them.
Yeah, there is a lot. Like, I know, like, Phil, like, actually one of the first times I ever met Phil was playing with Phil on D2. I don't think he didn't know who I was. I think I just started with the company. Well, it was D1 at the time. It was just Destiny at the time. But I think one of the friends I worked with at Xbox that got me the job played with Phil once in a while. And so I was actually playing with Phil. But, I mean, Phil had no idea who I was. I was just some random guy that just started with the company. So, but he was, yeah, that's one of the first ways I met him. But, yeah, there, like him and Tim and a couple others on the board I know play.
Well, definitely. Like I say, I see Phil every post of him playing xCloud is always Destiny 2. Just Destiny 2. Airport, Destiny 2. Destiny. No matter what you say, Destiny. Yeah, he's absolutely addicted to it.
Yeah. I was good. I was off of it for like a year, and then all of a sudden, people were like, "Hey, jump back on." So I was like, "All right, fine. I'll help pull someone through." And next thing I know, I'm grinding every day again. I'm like I don't think I've played much else. I don't have a single like player point this month because all I've played is D2. So I don't think I've earned one achievement this month, which is amazing for me. Like normally I'll have like 1,000 or a couple thousand a month because I'll just pick up some of the store games. But this month I'm pretty sure I have 0 points. So.
All Destiny this month. Awesome stuff.
Nice.
And before we get into the actual questions, we'll introduce our regular panel members this week. And first of all, obviously, one of the larger YouTubers, you all know him as Archimedes. How are you doing today, brother?
Good evening. I'm doing great. Been busy with work lately. Very busy, actually, working about 12 hours a day. So that's why it's gotten so quiet on my YouTube channel because I barely found the time. But yeah, I'm really excited to have David here today. Thank you for joining us. I think it's going to be a fun show.
Awesome stuff. And last but not least, Patja, how are you doing today, brother? What you been up to?
Oh, I'm doing good, man. I'm really excited. Looking forward to today's podcast. It's an honor to meet you, David. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it, man. Doing good.
Awesome stuff. And obviously, we'll start with some gaming news for yourself as you managed to eventually hit Pirate Legend and in Sea of Thieves.
Yeah. Last Saturday, I became Pirate Legend. So yeah, it was a big grind for me. The last 4 weeks, I guess. Just keep playing Sea of Thieves with a lot of the guys, of course, Vincent, Erwin. Yeah. So yeah, it's been a pretty heavy ride, but finally I got it. So I'm really happy with it.
Got there in the end.
Yeah, like before the season ends. Yeah. So
awesome stuff. Brilliant. Well, obviously, time away. We do have David for around about an hour or so today. So. We'll make sure we'll make it count, and we can get back on with his job. But again, appreciate the time to come on today. Anyway, first and foremost, one of the obviously we've discussed a few of the questions. Sent them over to yourself, so you know relatively what we're going to ask. But we will start with a few from some of the panel members that couldn't be here today. first of all, we'll start with the kind of obvious question, which you'll probably get a lot of the time, but how difficult has it been with the pandemic over the last, say, what it feels like 2 years now? to kind of implement what you need to implement, and obviously the projects, to very large projects as well, bringing 2 consoles to the market, both in Series X, Series S, and the tail end of the Elite Series 2 controller, and now the wireless headset. I mean, that's a lot of projects to kind of be unveiling within a pandemic. How much different has that been? What's the difficulty level on that added to the project?
It's a good question. It's been crazy. I mean, it's been crazy, obviously, for everything and everyone. Like, I don't think it's unique to the hardware, but specific to the hardware. I think honestly, it's interesting. I think 2 weeks ago, officially, or 2 weeks ago, Friday, was our official 1 year anniversary of not being allowed at work, and so we kind of had a little thing for it because it's a big deal. Obviously, every company struggled with a pandemic, so don't get me wrong. Like, it's different, but to your point, like, you know, we're launching the 2 consoles, and then of course everyone always forgets there's actually 4 consoles, because there is the dev kit. There is also the one that we actually designed the motherboard that goes into the racks that makes xCloud.
Yes.
So we actually had 4 consoles, 2 controllers, a headset, a external storage module, all these kinds of things. So the good thing we had is, I mean, I've worked in, you know, basically all the hardware business for 25 years, and I've done this a lot before. And the big delta for us, especially as a US-based dev center, we would normally spend literally just dozens of people every time we do builds. And, you know, when we're building the prototypes and you know, to make it easier. So, because there's always little things, like every time you build, there's lots of little pieces don't fit together. The wrong parts were sent. And so we always have to do all these mitigations. And so a lot of the things that would normally be kind of our total wheelhouse for a lot of us, it was hard I mean, we were doing things where my teams were platooning. So basically what it was, because obviously opposite hours with Asia. So when the factory was up and running, I had people sitting in different rooms with cameras on for 24/7 for maybe 2-3 weeks straight at a time, where somebody was always online, versus like normally we'd be sitting right there and you just walk out the line and you solve the problem. But when you're not online, or not there physically, it's a lot harder. And it's not even like you can have just one person, like a person that does just mechanics or just software. So the problem is, like, every issue, it's 10 different disciplines that you need somebody. So the builds for us were probably the most complex part. The good thing is, when the pandemic started, we had already gotten over what we usually call the initial builds. And those are the ones where we really struggle. Like, those are the ones where you need a lot of people and a lot of resources just to get the first ones, you know, to get that sock and get the chips and the memory running for the very first time. Is usually the biggest one. So luckily, by the time the pandemic hit, we were kind of in the middle of our prototype builds. So now it's a lot of the little stuff. The little stuff is what kills you, but it was so many of those. So I mean, the big thing for us was probably our biggest problem was that. And then of course, you know, our vendor companies where we get all the parts from, they're on pandemic. And so we struggled a lot with the 2 of us making our schedules work to where we can do these builds and that kind of stuff. So it was hard, but I mean, I think we got a little lucky of how far we were into the programs by the time it started, but it was definitely interesting and hard for everybody. And I'm sure any industry felt the same problem.
Yeah, I feel like I've heard, I think somebody speak about that before. And the main part, of course, was trying to liaise with the Asian kind of centers at the same time as over in the US was one of the more difficult parts, because again, the time difference was so great that even just getting hands-on with the units to see what the problem was or try to fix a problem, you couldn't do that physically. You had to do that remotely, which was the hard part.
I mean, something as simple as a lot of the testing we do, you know, so even when we do get the build done and we bring the units and they're in Redmond and they're sitting in one of my labs being tested, they run on tests that run 24/7. You know, they just test. Well, the problem is power goes out, or there's a small problem in the building power or whatever. And so all of a sudden I've got 300 consoles that are all waiting to be turned back on. So I have to send someone in at 2:00 in the morning to just go beep, 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 beep. and turn all of like little things like that you just never think of, because normally people are there 24/7, so you just would turn, it would never even be a thing. But you'd have 60 people IMing me like at 3 a.m. going, our systems are down, and you're like, okay, well, I have to send someone in. So I mean, it was things like that where the struggle, just not being in person. But again, we were lucky that we were allowed to come to work. We had essential workers where we spent a ton of time just on cleanliness, spacing them out. Like we never had one person, more than one in the lab, and where normally we might have 20 in the lab. So it was a struggle to do it, but luckily the government and us, we worked pretty well that as long as we met guidelines, we could do it.
Yeah, I think I've heard, especially if you had a look at following the Bethesda Roundtable, just how much kind of work ZeniMax have put into their studio they've got the wristbands and everything to ensure separation, and as well as everything else. Is that something that you worked with as well? Or is that something that not quite? We
were much more, because they're at the phase now where people kind of need to come in. Like at this, like back when this all started, we probably had, I don't know, only about 2 weeks of actual what I'd call shutdown, where we were not doing anything other than virtual meetings and things like that. But the actual hardware being touched was nothing. We had to work with state and local officials, because it's not even just Washington or Redmond area or Seattle where we are. We also have a big, a lot of my personal team is actually in the Silicon Valley area. And we do a lot of our testing down there. So California has completely different laws than Washington. So we had to have all these different things, but we didn't have to do the wristband level. But every time someone, obviously you have to get the buildings with badges, we can track every single person going through every door they go to. So we knew who was where and all that kind of stuff. But we did have rules that only these 15 badges or the people are even allowed in the building. Anyone else is just rejected. So we had like a set rule of exactly who's even allowed in what building and at what time and all that kind of stuff. So I wish we had the wristbands. I think it would have been a much easier idea, but I think we were all scrambling back then.
I mean, they're awesome. I don't know how they've managed to get their hands on them, but proximity wristbands seem like a really good idea in a world full of distance rules.
I suggested that today during a meeting after I've seen it.
I just couldn't imagine. It's so dystopian, like sitting there around, we're all ID tagged. I mean, like literally, like I could imagine, it's just right out of an Orwell book or something of like, hey, we're all being tagged of where we are at all times. And I'm like, okay, I'm not sure I want to tell my team that.
Yeah, that's really a challenge. But considering all these challenges with the pandemic and everything, we have seen almost none complaints about failures or bigger mistakes on the hardware side of levels. So did you meet your expectations for the launch of the consoles?
Oh, from a quality perspective, absolutely. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's always onesies. And, like day one, there was people complained of power issues. But when you really got to how many of them were social media retweets or how many of them were actual power problems. But the good thing is we were set up differently this time. And maybe the better question is, first of all, we did think differently pre-launch. I mean, obviously we always prototype and we beta internally and all these kind of things, but we did way more aggressive testing on these, probably from a use case. So my team owns what you'd probably call more like dev test. And so like making sure that they meet the spec they're supposed to meet. Then we have a different team that kind of tests the field quality, because you kind of want to keep those a little separate. You don't want the dev team telling you what your field quality is.
Yeah.
And so we ran it a little differently, and the take-home people, like the amount of people we normally only allow the Xbox team within Microsoft to really take home units. This time we opened it up to all of Microsoft. So we had a lot more units out in the field being tested for the field quality stuff, not just the test quality. And then in addition to it, our quality team kind of changed slightly of field quality. So the way we were tracking day one failures was way more efficient. So like the moment we even got the very first, second, third out of box type failures, we already had whole teams of people sitting in rooms. So it was much more efficient. So we were a little more proactive, not only in making sure our launch quality was better, but we were way more prepared that the day we did launch to have everyone basically on standby. Because we were afraid that if something happened, especially during pandemic, we were really nervous that if there was any sort of failure that we weren't ready to catch, people wouldn't be prepared to how to work on them, how to get the units back, how to have discussions and all that if we weren't face to face. But I think we did a really good job with the quality and obviously that was the most important thing. Was more the proactive approach to how we design and test the consoles. Not that we ever did a bad job in the past, but use cases are different than they were 7 years ago when we did Xbox One, or 8 years when we did Xbox One. So we've learned a lot, I think, in those, and every console we learn more, but certainly this was a big one because we launched so many on day one. It wasn't just one console, one controller. It was multiple controllers, multiple consoles. So it was interesting. So we got, I think, a lot of great learnings.
Awesome stuff. One thing I wanted to ask as well was, was there anything that was particularly that you needed to invent in order to kind of circumvent any problems that you were having at the time? Was there anything that you had to specifically kind of come up with there and then to fix particular issues with maybe the power draw, or was it the dual motherboards as well, which was it's a new one? That in itself must have been a headache, just trying to get dual motherboards to work as they should do. Was there anything specific that you needed to change or add to it to get them to work in the first place? Oh
yeah, I mean, it seems like every time we launch a console, you have these great learnings because there's things that we are certainly on the cutting edge of. I mean, how do you take the power of a high-end PC and get it for $500 at day one is complicated. So things like thermals and power, obviously, where it's not as sexy to talk about thermals. Like people are they want to talk about teraflops and memory. Thermal's not the sexiest thing in the world, but it's what a lot of people don't realize. It's the thing that really sets the form factors and the capabilities, because everyone wants smaller and tinier and quieter, but the smaller, tinier, quieter you make it, the less power you can have. And so therefore you have to find this really nice balance. And honestly, years ago, our team developed this thing called the Hovis method to actually help with the way that we do our power levels on our consoles. And it's become, there's other industries that are already using it. And now you hit on it directly, which is on this one, it was a very unique idea to break that motherboard and split it with the heat pipe or the heat sink in between the two, like a little sandwich. It was a brilliant idea. At the end of the day, you're like, I don't know why no one's ever thought of this before. But it sounds pretty simple. But the problem was the assembly of that is very difficult. So in theory, the design made sense and the thermals made sense. So on paper and CAD, you're looking at it and you're like, oh, this is going to work. And the way the airflow will work and the way we can run the TIM right on the chips and the memory simultaneously, like this is brilliant. But then we're like, how in the heck am I going to build this thing though? Because there's no way to assemble it, right? So for the first time ever, I mean, don't get me wrong, Xbox has always used test lines. We actually have automated manufacturing lines, so assembly lines, putting these things together now, which is not something we do. We actually we do a lot of hand assembly. There's always fixtures and presses and things like that to be sort of automated, but this is a true automated line where you put it in and it comes out. I mean, it's pretty impressive what we had to do, and so we had to learn a lot quickly about robotics and auto assembly. Luckily, the Surface team from Microsoft, especially on like the Surface Books, have already perfected a lot of that stuff, because the way they do that, I don't know if the Surface Book is the all metal laptop one. They have a lot of complexity building that because it's kind of like a shell, so everything has to be kind of pre-built into it. So luckily we got to get some from them, but it was a huge learning curve for my mechanical team, the design for assembly team. But yeah, the split board was probably, I think, it seems simplistic, but probably one of the most genius things that we've seen on this product. Like, it really saved us a lot.
No, I can imagine. I've obviously, not many people have, but I've had the opportunity to take my Series X apart for my custom project, so I've seen the internals of it. So I can see just how dense it is, densely packed in there, and of course seeing the large heatsink on one side, the power supply on the other side, and then just this very fine, thin layer of two sandwiched motherboards, CPU, GPU, and everything in between it's actually phenomenal to see, and it's just still kind of hard to understand how you've managed to get them not only to obviously just to marry up and be there in the first place, but then to work simultaneously. I mean, was there issues getting them to synchronize so they were actually working hand in hand and should we say married?
I mean, at the end of the day, it's a flex that connects it all. It's really not. That's what I was saying. It's really not that crazy of a concept.
Yes.
It just doesn't. I mean, it doesn't make cost sense because it's more expensive to assemble. It's more expensive because it's 2 boards. I have multiple connectors on each side for the flexes, and so assembly is really difficult. So yeah, you're paying more to do it, but at the end of the day, the console would have had to been twice as big if we didn't do it. And so when something's twice as big, you also have more mechanics, more cooling, more fans, so you kind of could have added cost here or added cost there. And so the idea wasn't simple by any means. It was a pretty complex idea and pretty robust fix for it. But cost-wise, it was I thought an amazing trade-off, because we got a console that, if you ask me personally, is probably one of the quietest consoles I've ever owned.
Oh, 100%.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, and so I've said this before on multiple interviews. Like honestly, what the team did was they built a turbine engine, like with the big fan we had. Because I remember being so blown away when they were thinking of the split board idea, mixed with how do you then evacuate the heat, and so the fan, and they're like, well, the fan's going to be this big, Dave, and you're like, that's so counterintuitive. How is it going to be quieter? Like, there's no way that's quieter. Like, that would make it noisier. And they're like, no, it's the opposite. The slower it can rotate, the quieter it is. And you're like, oh, like it all started to come together, even to the fact, like, when we had some of the first people ever do the demos that are very tech savvy, they were like, we just want to know how you solve the thermal problem. And as soon as we took it apart, I think the same thing you did, as soon as you take it out and you see how dense it is, and they saw the boards with both of them looked at it and went, ha, 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 ha. They're like, because again, it's a really simple thing. As soon as you see it, it makes sense. It's just not something very traditional, because it causes all sorts of other problems downstream. But it was a brilliant idea.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
So while we are speaking about hardware design, I mean, when you advertise the Xbox Series consoles, a lot of talk in the community was about RDNA 2 and its feature set and everything. When you started to develop the idea for the console and define the specs and everything, how did the process work within Microsoft? Did you approach AMD and said, oh, we need ray tracing and we need this and that? Or was it the other way around? Did they approach you and said, okay, look, 3 years down the line, 4 years down the line, our chips will be capable of doing this or that? So how did you come together and find these specs that are now in the console?
It's a joint effort. I mean, it's a good question. I don't think I've ever been asked it that way before, but it's a good question, because obviously working with AMD is a very joint R&D. We come with a lot of IP that none other, like anyone else buying the AMD chip doesn't need for their, because of the way they run their consoles versus the way we run ours. And so we come with a ton of IP. Like, a great example is, in order for back compat to work, you have to have a lot of IP from our system that allows it to work on their chip. And so they have to actually make a whole lot of design changes to work with our back compat. It's just an easy example. But then, yes, they come to us with like, hey, ray tracing and these things will be available with RDNA versus RDNA 2. Like, how far can you take it? What can you do? What you can't do? So we kind of have this mixed thing of like, hey, we know these are requirements. These are hardware things that we're going to need, that in order to have them available the day when we want, the only way is it has to come from the GPU or the CPU. And so therefore, probably, if you want to know the truth, that's one of the reasons that chips get started so much further before there's even a console. Start, chips are 4 years in advance of the launch date. And so that first year is all about IP work, which is they're telling us things they want to do, and we're telling them things we need to have or we're going to do.
Okay. So is it a case of then, did you go to AMD and say, right, we've come up with this idea of what we want this console to be, and these are the features we are looking to have in it, what are your plans and what are you doing? Is that essentially what is the case?
Yeah, I mean, just join in for that way, and then don't forget probably one of the big pieces that we come with. That's the much stronger piece. AMD's got a piece in it, but it's really coming from us, which is the developer story. It's what developers are going to be capable of in 5 years as well. So it's not just what I'm capable of. I mean, there's things we could do in the box. There's things I could do in the controllers that I could put them in today, but they don't do us any good if the developer's not going to touch it. And AMD and AMD's even one more step removed from the developers than we are. Now they do a lot more with developers on the PC side and network side. But when it comes to the gaming consoles, they kind of go through us and our competitors to tell them what they kind of need. So there's even this nice little triangle of what games will be capable of, what we as a strategic intent of Xbox wants to do, and then the strategic intent of what AMD wants to do. And we all kind of come together because, again, we can't put it all in there. Like sometimes it makes the chip too expensive, too complex, too large, whatever it be, the bigger it is, the more the thermals are, the more fallout you get in the factory, the more complex from the silicon, from the wafer, blah, 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 blah. So we have to come together. And so, but there's definitely, we come with ones we need, they come with ones they need, and then the developer story. And then we all kind of agree on what is, and don't get me wrong, there's minor changes throughout the process, but that first year is probably where the biggest work, because it's all the IP stuff that we all need.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what about the specs outside of the CPU and GPU? So, I mean, there's a lot of other things in there. You have the SSD, for instance. Yeah. Mm-hmm. How did that come together? Who did you approach? I'm not sure whether it's from Samsung or which kind of, or Seagate or whoever made the SSD. Or is that really something where you said, okay, we need to have this in the system in order to really utilize the power that will be available in 4 or 5 years when we have that RDNA 2 GPU and the CPU with the Zen 2 architecture and so on. So how did that come together?
That's a good one too. It's funny, for as big of a thing as everyone made of the SSD like a year before launch, I've had very few people actually ask about the SSD. Everybody wants to talk about the SoC. The SSD was actually a great story for our team because obviously, again, the silicon comes a little further. The SSD and the mechanics and the motherboard, they come about the year later. And so when we started on the SSD, we kind of already had specs of what we wanted the GPU or how we were going to use the GPU CPU to help an SSD. And for that matter, also how we were going to use the RAM and how we're going to use like virtual RAM by using the SSD, but it has to go through, the SoC. So it was this nice little triangle of memory, storage, and SoC. But this SSD was interesting because we would go to all the big vendors of SSDs, and we would give them our spec. And they'd be like, oh, well, let me take you in the back room. We've already got those today. Like, here's what we use on PC, and it's got this speed and this speed and this speed. And you're like, yeah, that's great. That's for a PC. That's not how a console works. And they're like, what do you mean? And you're like, well, when you're designing something for a PC, you design for burst. It's always like burst capabilities.
Yeah.
Ours is continuous. like you're always running at max. If you're playing a game, you're running at max. You're running at max, and so it's just killing that SSD. The other one is most PC data. Now, PC gaming is different, but PC data, when you think of big consumers of that need SSDs, they're also usually looking at sequential data. Mm-hmm. So the data is so again, it's burst and it knows right to find it every time. We're sitting there trying to find, this map, that map, this map, like constantly all over the place with a very dynamic, everly changing data source and running full speed. And so they all of a sudden we're like, what would yours do then? They're like, oh, because all of a sudden there's speeds that they were giving, because we said, oh, the spec has to be here. And they're like, oh, ours already does this. We're good. Take our part. And as soon as we said, no, in this situation, what's it doing? They're like, oh, it's like down here.
So we all know that when we have our SSDs in the PCs, it all comes down to thermals again. Yeah, like you said, it's the sexiest thing to talk about, but as soon as the SSD gets hot, the performance goes down. Yeah, sure.
That, and then the other big one, a lot of people don't know. I don't know if you guys have friends that are in like the camera business or photography and these kinds of things. Like solid state storage is not infinite. Like it degrades over time. And what degrades it is the more time you write to it. It's the write that kills it constantly. Well, in gaming, every second it's updating. It's updating that drive with your whatever you're updating in the game, and it's going and going and going. So again, the survivability of these things and durability of these drives is like nothing they've ever seen before. They've never seen writes like. So not only was their performance way down here, the reliability was way below our level. Like things like if we had just taken an off-the-shelf drive, it would have been about a quarter of the speed and only lived for about a year. That would have been, and at the time we were having these discussions, so like 3 years ago, that would have been an SSD that was coming out last year, maybe. So it's not even like we were talking about ones from 5 years ago. We were talking about 3 years ago for ones that were going to come out in 2 years. So if you took an off-the-market top-end SSD today, it would never last in a console as is. It wouldn't work. And that's why, that's why the ESM, that's why the storage module, the external storage module, the one we work with Seagate, that's why that was created because, and to your point of like, we totally agree. I mean, don't get me wrong, our partners helped us a ton with the firmware and the controller itself. But how the architecture was done and all that came from our team. And one of the reasons we partnered with Seagate so hard out of the gate, one of the reasons we partnered with them so hard was, I didn't mean that.
No pun intended.
Yeah, I was like, as soon as I said it, I was like, oh, that sounds bad. It was because we wanted the ability on day one, but the specs are so specific that we actually help Seagate mirror exactly what our internal one was, but just make it with a unique connector base. It's basically what it is. So don't get me wrong. Again, Seagate did a lot of firmware work, thermal work to make it work in that form factor and all that kind of stuff. But the architecture of how it worked came from us. And so a lot of people have already said, oh, Seagate, it's another one of these proprietary Xbox storage cards. And the truth is it's not. Like, it's now a technology that's going to be out there and other people will be able to work on it. Seagate was just our partner because, again, we had to work with them 2 years before launch. And so you just don't bring in every company at the time. But we spent a ton of time on the storage. That was I think it was, other than the thermals, I think it was the biggest achievement from our team.
Okay. Good stuff.
Awesome.
Good stuff. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of SSD talk prior to launch. But probably not in consideration here with Xbox, but seeing how well it works now, especially with the possibility that we can extend and have that simple plug and play solution to extend our storage is really something I can imagine that is not easy in the console space. I don't want to go too geeky here, but I have had a lot of discussions on my YouTube channel about one thing, and maybe you can shine some light into that. We have always wondered, how does the problem with fragmentation in an SSD work on a console? Because like you said, you're constantly writing and reading. Usually on your PC, you simply have the option, or in Windows or whatever you use to defragment your storage solution. How does that work in a console?
It's another good question. Wow, I like the geeky questions. most of my interviews are like, so what do you think of Phil? It's interesting. That's a good question because it's another proprietary thing. I mean, not proprietary, that's a secret. Proprietary how we do it. It's not shocking. The console's actually capable of self-defragmentation. It actually does it every time you boot up and boot off. In fact, and then to go further on that, we actually reserve a ton of blocks just for fragmentation reasons. And as the blocks start to die over time, like I said, like that's just how solid state drives work, that eventually in the NAND, you lose some of the blocks. We have to reserve per layer and all that kind of stuff, like a certain amount of blocks that during defragmentation, if there is a problem, we actually have a bunch of reserves. Has nothing to do with the size of the drive. It's not like one of these, hey, 1 terabyte an 890 or whatever. That's not the reserve part there. It's something we do at the NAND level. But yeah, it's a good question. Like they defragment themselves, and they do it constantly.
Constantly. Okay, makes total sense.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We're hearing, on the developer side as well, we're hearing, well, at least we have heard from a number of the developers so far that they've barely even kind of scratched the surface on what these series consoles can do. 40% is kind of the power that we've heard the number bandied around all the time is roughly what they've touched. Now, in terms of obviously seeing it on your side, how are you able to even test out what the console is capable of if you haven't achieved what the console is capable of yet on a software level? and how much more power is there really kind of to be able to achieve these additional, because we know ray tracing, even though it's been out for a number of years now on PC, it's still very much on its early infancy on console right now, so it's still getting to grips with how to kind of implement it correctly without then reducing another thing or having a knock-on effect on another thing, like either performance or resolution or asset quality and things like that. So from a developer point of view, that 40% kind of ceiling that they're hitting at the minute, is that around about right from what you've heard as well internally? Is there that much extra leg room, another 60% that they can squeeze out of that?
I mean, I'll be honest, I'm not the person that's probably speaking for developers. It's probably more like the Jason Ronald world, who I'm sure you've seen. That's more he's more my counterpart for the software, the developer side. I mean, anyone that says they're using only 40%, I think that's a little crazy. I think that number's wrong. And my guess is that someone's saying, like, hey, there's so much more we could do because the technology. I don't think it means direct power. Like, yes, exactly. I guarantee you, anyone that's making a game right now, even the people that are just updating for X and S, that are optimized, if there's, again, I'm not a developer, so I shouldn't speak for developers, but if one thing I know about developers is they're, if anything, always going to push over the limit, not under the limit. So I find it crazy that anyone would be developing that low. So I think what they mean is the potential of what you could do, like new paradigms, new genres. We're only scratching the surface of what this thing is capable of because we haven't quite, again, between us and the whole ecosystem, not just us, but Sony and everybody else, we design these things so they have to work for 7 years. And so again, when I was telling you, there's this kind of like AMD developer Xbox type triangle, we know what developers want to do, what we can do, what they can do. Because even like our backbone systems and size, does anyone want a 400, 500 gig game? No one really does yet. So it's like, there's all these,
well, no one players do.
So like, you have all these issues where like some things just aren't capable yet. But I'd hate to say, I don't want to 100% equate, like someone may have made an off the cuff remark somewhere about 40%, but I hope what they mean is we're just getting started with what this new Gen 9 is capable of. And that's across the board versus like literally saying, hey, if you get 3 watts of power, you actually are only using one, I don't think that's right. I guarantee you right now with what our thermal, with what they're telling me, the thermal has to run it and the power has to run. I know exactly how much power they want to use. So I'd be surprised if that's how they meant it, but it could have been like a studio that was like, hey, we knew we could do this. We just haven't done it yet. Like maybe they were co-developing still for Gen 8 and they said, hey, when we're kind of making it to work on Gen 8, we may not be taking the full advantages of Gen 9 yet. It could have been. That's what I mean without knowing the exact thing. I think it's that way. But we all know developers are going to want to use as much power as they can.
Oh, most definitely. Speaking of that, however, of course, especially at the early stage of getting the console released, we heard there was a little bit of a delay on the tool set issue, or at least the dev tool sets weren't kind of updated enough for them to kind of get things out and across the board. What was the issue there, and is that kind of starting to, or at least has that been alleviated since then? Or
yeah, I think are you referring to the fact that a lot of the times when they'll say, oh, well, we don't have as many titles on day one because our dev kits. When you mean dev kit, you mean the developer kit? Okay, yes. Okay. Yes. So the dev kit, in all sense, you got to remember, is a Series S and X.
Yeah.
And so remember, if it's not ready to ship to the public, it's not really ready for dev. So the question is, when are you ready to give it to developers? Because the last thing you'd want to do is have them start developing on something and then have to change it because then they have to do work. We also has to do with what chip did we get versus our competitor. We waited. We got the full RDNA 2. So, of course, by doing that, we started a little later. And so we got in a little later. And so it was I'd hate to say it's, we would have loved to get it done sooner. And obviously, every program has slight delays. But that was a conscious decision. We wanted that final hardware. We actually could have gotten the earlier chip to get them started on work a little early. But again, what we didn't want, the last thing you want is, because we didn't have the chip yet of the RDNA, full RDNA 2, that you may have to make like memory changes, like the way we do the memory and all. And that would be the last thing you'd want developers to
full new structure.
Right. And so like we made a conscious decision to do that. And I still think it was the right choice because I think launching the way we launched, I think we are in a great place right now that we've given ourselves some more forward-looking and more forward capabilities versus being, what the developer had, what would be equivalent of now. So again, remember, we're trying to make these things work for the next 7 years. So it doesn't mean we won't do new ones. It just means that at least they think of a generation. It's got to last through the several years. And the last thing we want is developers getting new dev kits every year. So we wanted the dev kit to be forward compatible, which is what we did.
Yeah, so it's a short and simple answer was just waiting for that, making sure that chipset was full RDNA 2 prior to it coming out. So it was just holding breaks before the devs got it.
Yeah, and again, the architecture that has to go with it. Because again, until that chip is done and architected, our board and our memory, and even we get the BDK from AMD directly on how the memory works with the SoC. And so everything kind of comes at that last minute kind of thing where anything you did too early that wasn't our final architecture would have resulted in any developer that had one of, I would say, starting over, but certainly doing rework, which is the last thing you want to do in this industry.
Well, most definitely, especially games designed specifically for next generation. And of course, as we know, for some of the games coming out, not just later on in the year, but mainly 2022, 23, 24, them games are specifically designed for this new hardware as opposed to cross-generational games, like you say, where at least they can develop for something previous. And as we know, speaking to some indie developers, they were kind of given a spec sheet of, okay, this is how much you've got to work with. So at least you can say, right, this is the headroom you've got, but this is just aim for current gen, but you've got this much headroom for next gen, so you know what you can do.
Yeah, that's the hard part, especially when you look at the install base of both us and Sony. I mean, it's hard on developers. I mean, you're taking a big risk by designing anything for Gen 9 out of the gate. And so that's what I mean is I applaud and am super thankful for anyone that's on board with us to take that kind of risk on something they don't even know if it's, we could have been late. Or the hardware was not capable of what it was supposed to be. So any studio that's willing to take that risk, especially at launch or near launch, the last thing I want to do is make them have to do more work or take even more risk. And so that's why we did what we did. And I think a lot of the developers we talked to were very appreciative of our dev kit. I think they like our dev. In fact, we've heard a lot of direct feedback that our dev kit's pretty good.
Awesome stuff.
Good. I'm not sure whether you. Pardon me, Pat. Go ahead.
Can I ask one question? I'm interested. As soon as the console came together, what was the first game that you guys tested out, and how did it run?
It's another good. Obviously, we usually work with first parties because it's we can tell them exactly specs long before anyone else is supposed to know specs yet. So this time it was Coalition made us a Gears of War 5. So it was Gen, so they're not rewriting the game. But it was written as if it was written for, so I mean, they didn't redo all the polygons. They didn't really do all the art, but they obviously had to do some work to make it work the way we wanted it to. So to run full 4K 120. And, for those of us that love Gears of War as it is, I'm telling you, at a proto level was the most gorgeous thing I've ever seen. It ran day one. We were playing on day one. I actually remember when Phil not only got Gears working on his console, but he got it working on Series S one day later.
Okay.
And he's like, I can't believe this just runs already. He's like this, and he's at his house already playing Gears 5 at, I think at the time it was 4K 60, but it was 1440 60 FPS, but fully upgraded. And so it was awesome. Like it was just a great review. Like we've never had it run that smooth day one. I guarantee you. PvP games came a little later, but I can tell you from what we were seeing and just graphically, when you've got your counter in the corner and you're just like, oh my god, are we really hitting that? And it was impressive stuff out of the gate. Like it was a great job. But yeah, it was Gears of War 5 was first.
Awesome. Nice.
I think followed up by Horizon was right behind it. I think Horizon was the other one we played a lot of.
Okay.
That's another one that scales beautifully across devices, mind. That works. Same on PC, on Series S, One S, One X, all the consoles. Playground Games do an amazing job with development and optimization. That thing just runs so well.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why we like it, because it's so easy to see, the difference between short vision, long vision, and then blur vision. Like you can actually freeze frame it and show the deltas. It was like those games, and Gears for that matter too. When you see those, it's always such a movement game. But when you turn around and look in the mountains, and you see again the short, the movement, and the blur, you could actually pick. It was so easy to do a screen comparison of XS versus the S before in Scorpio, and you put the two, and you're just it was just blowing it away. And you're just like, wow, on a 1440 to see how good even the S looked was just blowing everyone away.
Nice.
Yeah, absolutely. With one eye on the clock, because we have to let you go eventually. Besides the consoles, you guys did a couple of amazing hardware peripherals. Obviously, the Elite controllers. You just launched the headset. Let us talk a little bit about that. What was the idea behind putting out a headset from Xbox? I mean, there are tons of headsets on the market already. What made you guys develop your own headset?
I mean, we've wanted to do a headset for years. We keep getting it to the point we have I've got prototype after prototype in my office for the last 6 years. We keep building them, but it's a good question, because the real theory is what's going to differentiate us from somebody else. For the same reason I don't make a keyboard and mouse. People constantly, and now that we allow keyboard and mice, people are like, make a keyboard. I'm like, what could I possibly do to a keyboard that 9 million other guys don't make? So headset was kind of the same thing. So many out there and so many good ones. And don't forget, since we haven't made one, we have made great partnerships with a lot of the big companies that are out there today, and who all make great stuff too. And so you're like, do I really want to design something that is a competitor of something I already kind of work with? So it got difficult, but obviously because it's a new generation and we have some new things in there with Atmos, as well as Windows. There's a lot of things we can do that were great. But really the sales point for us internally was, we thought what we could do was purposely bring an upper mid. This is going to sound crazy because there's so many tiers in headsets, right? I mean, everything from cheap wires to $500 Bang & Olufsen type things. We were looking at the COGS, how costly something is to make, and the feature sets that are capable, and what a lot of those features cost, because you have to pay royalties on a lot of things. And we started doing the math, and we're like, you know what? I think I can actually make a headset that has upper mid-tier features, but get it in a low mid-tier price. And we're like, now that's something to sell. And so all of a sudden we were scratching our heads, and we took it more seriously. And we really started working with a lot of our vendor companies to figure out exactly, make sure we had our COGS right, cost right, ASP, what we would be able to sell it for. And we really went through feature by feature by feature, and we said, you know what? We really do have an upper mid-tier feature set for a low mid-tier price. I mean, getting some of the things that I would consider are a $200 headset feature into a $100 headset, I think is phenomenal, especially doing some of the things we know we can do with a wireless direct to console. Now, wireless to a computer or your phone, it's Bluetooth and does some cool things. But the fact that we know our firmware, we know our radios better than obviously our competition do. So we knew things about connectivity, we knew things about performance, working on chat, working on auto mic and those kind of things. We know how to have our system get the most out of it. So again, I think we took what we thought no one else is making or no one else is capable of making. So at the time, it worked great. And I think we've proven, I mean, at least from the reviews I've seen today, you know, obviously there's some nits, and I always try to tell people, and it's funny because I work for some people that no matter what I do, they're like, oh, you know, you could have done better. Look at all these negative social media posts. And you're like, I try to help them a little bit that this isn't the old days. Like, I'm like, I could design somebody a free brick of gold. And somebody's going to say, yeah, but it could have been platinum. You know, no matter what I do, someone's going to knock it. I mean, but to be fair, some of the reviews I've said, you know, are I don't think any of us are complaining like, oh, you totally have us on that. I think we hit everything we wanted to hit and more for the price.
That's awesome. It's funny you phrase it that way, because when you guys announced that the headset, we had a discussion here. I think it was on this podcast, and what we said is basically the price point is perfect, because we have a lot of headsets in the 150 to 200 buck range in that kind of sort of thing. But to be at a price point of 100 and having a certain feature set in it is really tough. Yeah, you can have relatively good with a good driver in it or something for 100 bucks, but then they are wired. Or the other way around. Yeah, you don't have the good driver in it, and your head and your wireless. But this is actually a good combination. So, can you talk a little bit about the driver that is in there? Because I think this is well, the thing that people should look at when they decide, do I want to spend extra 100 bucks and get a Steel Series or an Astro, something about that, like that? Yeah. So what is in the driver of your headset?
I mean, the 40 millimeter that we have in there, I think, first, I mean, don't get me wrong. In the audiophile world, you can't, this is another one of those where you can't be right, because some people want the full range. You could probably tell from a lot of the reviews, we probably went a little bass heavy. And so we took particular drivers and cups that we thought would deliver most round sound, but with great on bass on purpose. A lot of times, a lot of companies, I think, try to get everything perfect in sound, and I think the $99 range perfect is not possible. So you kind of need to narrow, and I think a lot of companies go a little too broad. We went directly with a vendor of ours that we knew could deliver the driver with feature set. And don't forget, much like cell phones and PCs, a lot of people use the same parts. It's the implementation of the parts. So we're not the only one actually using the drivers we use or the driver we use. But again, what we did was we could mix it with what I would consider, for $99, probably one of the best batteries in the price range. Certainly the best wireless connectivity for gaming, because it works directly with it. And by the way, the simultaneous, like right now, Destiny's playing in the background in my ear, and while I'm talking to you guys, like it's the seamlessness of my PC to my console is just off the charts. I don't even have to think about it. It's like the most brilliant thing ever. But like I said, I mean, but there were trade-offs. I mean, there were things we wanted to put in it that we didn't put in it because it was cost. I've said in other interviews, like the biggest thing I really wish we did, because I don't wear lifestyle headsets like Beats, and I only wear my gaming headsets just because that's just what I wear. I would love to have had them be lie flats, just because I wear them on planes and stuff. So I would have loved to have lie flat, but that adds $15 of mechanics to have swivels and that don't break. And so, I mean, your price now, and I don't know if anyone knows the party. Yeah. Like lie flats are great, but again, for $99, I wouldn't have given up anything for it. And that was the conscious decision. So there were a couple things we wish we could have. I would have liked to have a 3.5 jack in it, just for the few people that still want to have a 3.5 jack. Though I try to tell people, they're like, yeah, but they can't play while it's charging. I'm like, well, actually you can. You just need a longer USB cable. You just can't play with the little one they give you. But but if you use the one that comes with like if you use the USB cable that comes with the Series 2, is what I do. But I'll be honest, other than when I was back at the office, I am on this thing on Bluetooth through my PC for Teams like all day long at work while it's connected to my console. I'm on this thing at least 12 hours a day. I've never had it die during the day. Now I charge it every night, but I'm saying like the battery life is really good on this. I don't even notice it.
Nice.
But I think so. Basically, our trade-off I think was great. I wouldn't say we've done anything that another company couldn't do. It's just having the right priorities, except for the fact that really gave us the advantage was the connectivity that we can do with a console, like having the app on the console to change like, your mic monitoring and your bass levels and things like no one else could have done that. Like everything would have, it'd have to be you use an app on your computer or your phone and then you change it, then you go to the console, which I always thought was janky a little bit. But.
Most certainly. Most certainly.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I do my own stuff too. Like, don't get me wrong. My gaming world is all like that too. So I mean, I'm not going to blame anyone else. But I think that was, again, those are the things that got us that. I don't want to say what price range, the upper mid range down to the lower mid range price, like got us right there. And that was our directive the whole time on that project. And honestly, I think I checked every box that we wanted.
Nice.
And one of the final questions from myself as well is another one of the peripherals that you've helped design, or should I say two of them, was the Pro controllers, of course. The Elite Series 1 and Series 2 controllers, of course. The first official direct Pro controllers for a console from any company. What was it like designing, or at least coming up with that idea and then designing them? I know obviously you've dealt with partners such as Scuff Gaming and everything like that over the years, but taking that back in and saying, right, okay, we're going to design our own, but again, going to price it better than our competitors, provide the same feature set, but better build quality. How hard was just coming up with the creation of, first of all, the Elite 1 and then trying to better the Elite 1 and create the Elite 2?
The concept of Elite wasn't new. People have been asking for it years. To your point, there's third-party companies that make it, or well, sort of, because most of them buy our standard controller and then they just buy it at the store like normal people do, and then modify it. And so we've been asked for like a Pro, a Premium, an Elite, whatever you want to call it. There's all different names for it. Multiple, years and years, but there was a hard rule at Xbox where the idea was for inclusion reasons, some altruistic reasons, but it was supposed to be like, hey, no one should feel they don't have enough, that they're different because someone makes more or less more. Like gaming is supposed to be comparable, right? Like someone that's a noob should be able to play with someone that's a master, and the equipment doesn't make the difference, and you shouldn't be able like I don't know about you, but my PC rig is probably better than 95% of PC rigs. I can tell you what I see on my screen at 220 FPS is not the same thing other people are playing. So in a PvP match, I have a big advantage. On console, we were always trying to say like, no, it should be a level playing field. No one should ever, and we should design controllers for every hand type, big, small, different grips, and all this kind of stuff. But then we kind of went the other way and said, well, I made it. So honestly, when I started with the company, I got hired to do Elite 1 in a way. I got hired to do. I was brought on to do like different products. Like they wanted to get in the space of doing something different. One of the first things they gave me was, well, what would you do in the controller space? And at first they wanted me to make a Bluetooth controller, which It would have been nice to have one 5-6 years ago. Everyone would have liked a Bluetooth controller, but I actually said no. Like let's make this like premium controller instead, because I think that's a better market. And I think more people are wanting. And it was a big resistance of like, no, we don't do that. We have to be inclusive. That's cheating. And we're like, no, this isn't a cheater controller. It's it's meant for somebody like the look. I was trying to say again, like if you look at like right when those golf clubs, but like. There's a spec, like you can't just make these golf clubs out of materials that make the ball go twice as far. It's like you have to make them like these kinds of, the grooves have to be set. They can only be so long. And it's the same thing here. It was like, look, we're not trying to make cheaters. We're not trying to do anything different. We're just like, if someone can go to the store today and buy the same thing, well, why don't we make a better version of it?
Yeah.
And something more affordable for that matter. I can't tell you how many people write me with like how many times they've broken their controller because they're trying to mod it. And you're like, all right, well, that's not the way to go. So let's get them something they really want. And so we were on a pretty shoestring budget because no one really believed in it. There was a big thing that we would not sell very many, and who the heck would ever pay that kind of money for a controller? And if you remember, it was sold out for like a year.
Yep.
So it ended up doing really well, but we were on a pretty tight budget, and our mechanical team and our electrical team, but our dev team in general, oh my gosh. I mean, they took my vision and they made this thing, and it was awesome. Like we worked on this thing, everything from like, you may have heard in past interviews, like I spent 6 to 9 months in the field, going to people's houses, like ex-pros, all the way to people that may not be a pro, but they pay, or they play 12 hours a day, every day. Like we were hitting like different countries on purpose. We hit everything and said, how do we find what would be the ultimate device as much as we can? And then we kind of had to set some standards of like, well, who are you designing for? Is it for the person that just has money? Are you designing for the person that wants to be professional, or the person that plays? And so there are all these questions, and we kind of basically narrowed it down and said, look, I'm going to design for the 1%ers. I'm going to design for the people that want to play 12 hours a day, or they're trying to really find that just way to optimize the thumbstick just enough so their kill death ratio goes up by 0.01%. Like I'm not going to make anyone go from being 2 kills a game to 30 kills a game. I think that's not going to happen. But the difference is 1 extra kill every 10 games. I mean, that's a big difference when you're going to pro level. And so we designed it for that and those people in mind. And much like any other professional type things, you had an aspirational crowd. Like people were like, hey, this is great. And so I used to get interviewed all the time of like, hey, why'd you make this professional controller for pros? And I was like, no, it's not a pro controller. Like I'm too old, I'm too arthritic, like my finger, too many years of playing ball and Halo that my fingers hurt. And so I designed it so I could have the paddles on the back and the grips on the side to help me play for more hours in a day. And so we were developing, so it was like, hey, anybody is a premium game. It's like a premium device more than it was a pro device. But when we got into the Elite 2, we were like, how do you perfect it even more? And honestly, a lot of the Elite 2 features were things we would have done on Elite 1 if we had had a real budget and real time. So the Elite 2, I don't consider the revolution that Series 1 was. It was more of an evolution of something. But Elite 2 is ultimately what we really wanted. I mean, I don't know about anyone, everyone has the thing they love. Adjustable thumbsticks to me is because I can get them back to the tension of the 360s.
Yeah.
For anyone that doesn't know,
the first thing I did as well.
The lowest setting on it is it's the exact tension that the 360 controller had. I designed that on purpose, like because it's easy to get to, and that's what it was. Like, was the most awesome thing for me, and I really wanted that in Series 1. But making that was a 3-year like to make that adjustable thing took like 3 years because there was so many weirdness you never think about, but screwing a tension, it's like you basically had a spring and you're tightening it is all you're really doing. Well, the problem is adjustable and now it breaks more and all, like it was really complex. So we had to spend a lot of time on that. We didn't want, and the point of Elite was, because I have people all the time who are like, Dave, put an LED in it or an LCD in it. And you're like, that's great. It's going to cost $10 more. And what are you going to use it for? And they're like, I can pick plays in Madden. I can play Uno. Like no one has a great idea for it. So I was like, okay, that's a cool feature for like a really lot of money. That's very premium feel. But the idea, what we were trying to do with Elite was whatever we did, you're doing it for a purpose and do it really well. Don't just throw the kitchen sink ideas in there. Like actually make stuff and make it with a purpose and try to make it as high as quality as possible. And so that's why when we got to the Series 1 and we were close to that adjustable tension, we pulled back and said, no, it's just not ready. There were too many problems with it. So we didn't do it. But Series 2 was great. I love finishing Series 2. And you know, and I honestly didn't get to take it across the finish. I got promoted a couple times. So that I got to the point where they're like, Dave, you have to let it go. I was like, I don't want to let it go. No. So Alan Carranza on my team was the one that actually launched it, and God love him, because it was tough to get it across the line. But those were my first real things at Xbox that got me where I was, and I thank every day of it. I had so much fun on those projects.
The one thing I did notice about the Elite 2 as well, of course, is obviously the changes. A lot of people wouldn't have noticed it anyway, but I take them apart and do custom spray jobs and everything for all the time. So the one thing I liked about the Elite 2 as an evolution to fix the grip problem you had in the Elite 1 was the entire rear shell was one piece, as opposed to three separate pieces, where you had the side panels and then the rear shell, and where you had the grips attaching on, and with wear and tear it would eventually kind of start to peel off and then expand and then no longer fit on it somehow.
Yeah. Grip is
but
weird.
On this one, in one rubber section on the entire back piece, that's just solved that issue entirely.
We actually did it for two reasons. One was, so if you look at the way a grip works, you know, originally we had it here because that's what the pressure is. But what we found was more people were putting like their arms over it, and it helped actually better with fingers to have it wrapped around. But at the same time, yes, we actually changed the material is slightly different than it was before, because a lot of people think it's like glued on there or something, but it's not. The way the process actually worked, even the Series 1, is it's a machine that takes two chemicals, the harder plastic and the softer plastic, and literally melts them together. And that's why when they would expand and come off, they didn't really fit again, because the way they came off was because it was now technically bigger than the other piece. But we changed all that on the Series 2 on purpose. And I think I do like the grips all around better. So they've been pretty good.
Yeah, it's been absolutely awesome. Absolutely awesome. Any final questions from Pat or Archimedes?
No, not from me.
So, first, thank you for taking time. It's been great, and obviously you cannot announce an Elite 3, but the thing that's really right now,
right now,
you make my gaming life really difficult each time, because I have all the Elites, and I have, of course, the Series X controller or the Series controller, and the share button. I'm always missing the share button. For me as a content creator, it's probably my most used button at the moment. Now that the idea when this series or the Elite 1 and 2 came out was new of a share button. Why did you make the decision not to implement that kind of button in those versions of the controller?
So yes, we thought of it certainly on the Series 2, because we kind of knew what we were doing with some of the Series X stuff coming later, or Series S stuff coming later. The reason we didn't is a couple dumb reasons. One, I don't know why we're just not smarter. We could launch an app right now that you can make any button be the share button. You know what I mean? Like keep a paddle to be your share button, or reprogram your D-pad up, or whatever you want it to be. So that hopefully is coming soon. I don't know whether it is or not, but we keep pushing for it. And so system functions should be able to, because remember, you could do other things like volume up and volume down. Yeah. So it's just shares just another function that someone needs to put out on that app to just have it programmable. But if you go back to the real reason why we don't have a share button on the Elite is honestly space. The controller.
I've got mine mapped to one of the paddle buttons, the top paddle button. I've got the screenshot button.
Is share in there now, or screen capture? Or is it in there now? Okay, good.
It in there. Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I've got it mapped to the back paddle on that.
But you do have to assign it to something, so that means you're giving up something. But that's why we've always given the option choices for multiple profiles, because it's like, hey, when you could hit the button really quickly in the middle to change the profile, to have all your buttons be shared, so you can get one really quick and then profile back. But honestly, one of the reasons there isn't a dedicated button was the room. I mean, the Elite has so much more stuff in it. There's literally nowhere on. I would have had to remove the profile button, or you got to remember, again, especially for the Elite, as well as any regular controller, we spend a ton of time on ergonomics, where your hands are and how your thumbs can hit things. There is really nowhere else left to go. That someone doesn't hit it either by accident or can't hit it when they want to, because it's either too far, too close. Like, honestly, even the share button, you may have seen, we've gotten a couple of feedbacks of people that go really hard on their right thumbstick will hit the share button by accident. So we have, but this is just physical space. But what we should do is the profile button is just another button. Is we could remap the profile button to just say, make it whatever you want. So if you don't want it to be a profile button, it could be your share button. Like I don't know why we don't do that. Like we could do that. But I'm glad that it's on there.
Yeah. I mean, is there anything then? Obviously, the one difference, I suppose, between the new series controllers, which you've launched, and the Elite 2 controller, then, is the ultra low latency that you've got in the new series controllers.
The DLI.
Is there any plans then to then bring out a Series 3 that would implement all of the new internal features that you've got in the not obviously the external is fine as it is on the Series 2 now, which is brilliant, but more of a kind of a slight refinement on obviously slight ergonomic changes, the texture bumpers and grips and things like that, as well as then the internal like ultra low latency and things like that.
So the very short term we want to do now that we've launched, honestly, I want to bring it the other way around, especially DLI. Now I can't bring the share button back to the last series of controllers because it's physical. But what I'd like to do when the DLI adoption, so what you're calling the latency, the DLI option, the dynamic latency input, that requires the studios to actually do work. That's not a free feature. So only certain titles really take advantage of it, but more will. So again, when we talk about this adoption of designing for Gen 9, more and more will start to adopt it. My idea is to actually port that back. I want to make it where DLI works on the current Elite and works on, it can't go all the way back because there are different radios. Depending, like if you went all the way back to Xbox One, like the one that came with Xbox One, that one's not even capable of upgrading that way. So, but some of the most recent ones, like I forget how we named it, but the one that started with Bluetooth. From the
That's
Bluetooth,
just the regular S controller then?
I think it came out when we launched the S. When we launched the S, the controllers from the S and above. Don't quote me 100%, whoever's writing an article on this interview. I believe everything that's from the S and above is capable of the firmware upgrade.
Yeah.
The problem is not every, and that's what I'm saying is capable. The problem is I have to rewrite firmware for them individually because they are treed and branched. They're not like it's a running OS for all of them, and because they all work slightly differently. So the priority will be the most recent controllers that came with Scorpio, as well as the Elite and the access control, the accessibility controller, because they're all kind of based on the same engine. So if I could get all three of those, I'd be really happy. But that's actually a priority for me. It's not done. I don't have a date for it, but that's a desire we want to do. Because think about it, if you're a developer, that even helps you give you more controllers capability. Like, because right now, if you're a major studio, you're like, well, they've only sold so many, so why should I develop for this? But if I can now backport it to all my existing, well, again, to a certain point, it gives the developers more reason to help us work on this deal.
Bigger install base,
Yeah.
So, a nice, easy one to kind of finish it off then. Are you aware of or know of any limited edition projects in the work for the Series X, S, or the Elite controllers, such as we're seeing with the Gears 1X or the Gears
plans? No plans, no schedule, but of course we're all, come on. We launch stuff every So will there be? Of course there be. The question is when and what. Because obviously you've already seen that there's already been a couple colors launched of the controller, and then you can't, like the red. I'm not sure what else is announced, so I can't talk about red, but blue. Okay. I mean, so the color ones are coming. So do the math.
And we'll have Design Labs back again soon, which will be good.
That I can't talk to yet, because again, like Design Lab is hard because you got to get the parts up and going. Like the controllers have to be up and going. It's a little different.
Gabby Mitchell, obviously we've had on the show before, and that was her baby as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was. I love Design Lab because Design Lab has all sorts of problems other than the controllers itself. Because there's a lot of back end problems with how do you drop an order. Like there's system stuff that's so different. Like that's not an engineering problem. Well, okay, it's a CS engineering problem. It's not a controller engineering problem. But yeah, I mean, obviously the goal is we'll always like Xbox loves special editions and limited editions. We love them, and we love to make them because the people that are designing them with us, they're gamers too. And so like a lot of us really, really enjoy them. And like, we all have our favorites from the last gen, and we all, like we always fight over which ones are the coolest and that kind. In fact, like I know this is a European one, but you guys know what March Madness is over there? Do you know what that is over here in the US?
I have never heard it.
That's it. College look it up if you get a chance. College basketball in the US is big. And in March, it's called March Madness, where there's 64 best college teams play each other in basketball. It's this big, to get to the final game. Someone today that used to work at Xbox actually posted they took 64 controllers from the last generation and is matching them up. And they're going to play like he didn't say how often, but they're then going to say who wins, and you're going to see who the ultimate champion is. So I didn't even realize we had so many SEs and LEs, but he has 64 of them. And so they're actually like everything from the last gen, and they're going to compete all month long while the tournament's going on. And so I was like, that's hilarious. But I love the SELs. Like I think the person we have, her name's Monique. She works on the ID team here at Xbox, and she's one of the main people that designs those things. And she is amazing. Like everything she makes from just the color of blue. I'm not an artist, but hue of blue, I don't know, whatever you call it, but the color of blue mixed with when she makes a Gears of War one or a Halo one, like it's off the charts. Like she's always amazing. So I love our SELEs. So yeah, hopefully sooner than later you'll see some.
Awesome stuff. And I want to obviously, like our committee said before, we are very conscious of time, and I've had you for an hour and 20 now. So
I'm 4 minutes late to a meeting. I'll be fine.
So we will begin to wrap it up for yourself at least. But no, absolute honor to have you on today. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to come on the show and obviously talk to us and our obviously awesome guests and fans. Awesome. If you would let the people know where they can find you, and if there's anything particular that you've got going on that you are able to talk about before you go.
No, I mean, there's so much I can. I mean, as always, like I'm appreciative of you guys having me here. I mean, like it's always amazing. Like I spent so many years of my career making running cell phones. I don't think I ever wanted an interview with a guy that made a cell phone. Like, but honestly, this is my passion and I love it. And so it's always great to be on board, especially like having the hardware team. And I'm super appreciative when everyone has me. So thank you very much for having me. I'm actually pretty responsive on DM to a lot of people on Twitter. I don't get to it every day for the people I don't know, but I'm usually, I mean, that's how you guys found me. Like I'm usually pretty responsive. And so I love feedback on hardware. I love feedback on what we could be doing. And I'm pretty good at responding as I can, as long as it's positive. Doesn't mean good, just means positive. Like don't swear at me and wish horrible things on my family, but as long as you're not doing that, I'm usually pretty good about response. But you can just hit me up on Twitter. It's DPRIEN at Twitter. Nothing crazy. But for sure, yeah, I'm always open to that. But again, I appreciate it, and we'll see each other home or soon, hopefully.
Yep, most definitely, most definitely.
Thank you so much.
It's been an absolute honor.
All right, guys, I'm going to sign off. Thanks a lot.
All right,
brilliant. Thank you. Have a good night.
Have a good one.
Awesome stuff, guys. Awesome stuff. So that was David Prien, Prien, as you know him, Senior Director of Hardware at Xbox. Obviously, we've just been through quite a lot there, so going through, obviously, how it's affected them through the development process due to the pandemic, any particular hardware failures that they had throughout, what kind of they did to mitigate certain things and change things, and then going into such things as controllers, RDNA 2, tool sets. I think we pretty much covered everything to do with those development processes.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, he's an awesome guy. If you consider how much he has going on right now, obviously he has to take care of all the aftermath of the launch of the consoles. That just put out the headset. They are 100% already working on the next ideas for hardware, maybe an enhanced version down the line or something else. But obviously, he and his teams are working on new stuff. And for him to just come out here and talk a little bit about this, it was a super fun thing to do. Really great insight, very knowledgeable. So yeah, been a fun show.
It has indeed. And obviously we'll cover off a couple of small things before we go as well, of course, this week, just to wrap up the news for everybody else who either isn't on Twitter or doesn't kind of spend with their days and with their heads into the gaming community like we do. Of course, this week we've had also the inclusion of quite a mass of games into Game Pass. We had a lot of large news this week as well when it comes to what comes with Game Pass. So for those of you who aren't primarily on Twitter or in the gaming headspace, Game Pass now has Outriders coming at launch on day one into Xbox Game Pass. So that's the first vehicle. Yeah.
Man, I had to cancel my pre-order. I pre-ordered the game back in, I think, December or something. Yeah. So I had to cancel it. I'm gladly taking that $70, but yeah.
No, it's exactly the same. I did exactly the same thing. But not only that, but then we had, and I think within the last week, we've had 37 new games lined up for Game Pass just this month, including, of course, the sneaky one that no one's seen coming, which is Octopath Traveler. I did not expect that one dropping in a million years, let alone day one onto Game Pass. What's your thoughts about that one, Archie?
I didn't see it coming either. And I mean, it's the kind of game that Xbox is really missing on the platform. Is the JRPG genre. And with Octopath Traveler, they have a good one on their hand. It was very well received on the Switch. I think when it launched on the Switch, there was a month where nobody talked anything else than Octopath Traveler. So, and for that to come to the other consoles, so PlayStation and Xbox, but for Xbox having that day one on Game Pass is a big win, definitely. I still think the bigger news is the Outriders thing. I think Outriders is that kind of game that is somewhere in between AA to AAA. It's most certainly wants to be a AAA title. But after the demo, a lot of people were on the fence with it. And now that is exactly what that game needs. Not having the entry barrier of a full price title is genius for the developer. It will get a lot more attention. A lot more people will talk about that. And it opens up the possibility for other, let's call it AAA third parties to consider to bring their games day and date into Game Pass.
Specifically for us, it's Square Enix. If you have a look at this month alone, they're bringing, at least keeping Nier Automata in there for a lot longer. They've extended that by the looks of things. Project Octopath, yet another Yakuza.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're just
although that's Sega, that's Sega. But but the thing really is, there is a lot coming from Square Enix. We know that Nier Replicant is getting that remaster or remake.
Yes, that's what I pre-ordered.
Yeah, same here.
Well, hopefully that goes into Game Pass.
Fingers crossed, exactly.
Like Outriders.
Yeah, and that's what I think is the big thing here. Yeah, we have with Octopath Traveler definitely a game that is probably not considered a AAA game, but that had the success of a AAA game on the Switch. We have that now coming to the other consoles. I'm looking for a right word, because I always say Nintendo is not playing in the regular console space. They have their own seem to be their own business entity to some degree. Yeah. But to the other console world, it is a day and date launch in Game Pass. That's big, and Outriders. It sets really an precedence for upcoming AAA games, and I do hope that a lot of other publishers will have a look at this very closely. Can a Ubisoft game or an EA game be a success day one in Game Pass? Good stuff here.
It is. It's very interesting to see. Quite obviously, and one of the things are, and again, Ludo's asking that question. Rumors about Persona and Final Fantasy VII. I think it's just a case of when, not if, they come to Game Pass. I think the more Game Pass succeeds, the more titles you'll see in Game Pass. And obviously, we were sitting a couple of months ago at 18 million subscribers. Now we're probably around about that 20 million mark now, if not a little bit higher. Obviously, with numbers, the more Xbox Game Pass grows, the more and more studios, the more developers, the more companies want to put their games onto Game Pass.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the business side of things, the bigger the subscription base is, the better Microsoft can pay developers. That they can bring up other payment models, more individual payment models and monetization models for the developers. And I bet that there are already charts out there when Microsoft is pitching Game Pass to Ubisoft, to EA, to Square Enix, and so on, where they tell them there's a certain break-even point. Yeah, when we have this kind of subscriber base, you will get make a better revenue than what you usually sell on our system, or something like that. And that is the exciting thing, and that's why we should all cheer when these bigger numbers come up of the subscriber base. And I bet by the end of the year we will have 25 to 30 million subscribers in Game Pass.
It's just absolutely insane. I mean, any of the titles that have come into that Game Pass lineup over the last week. I mean, and there has been a lot of titles. How many of them are really interesting you?
Well, I've played Dishonored before. That's a game that I want to play again. Never played Dishonored 2. So I'll be looking at that game for sure.
And things like Prien, etc., which have had the big boost in FPS.
Oh man, I'm playing. I jumped back into Skyrim with the 60 FPS boost. Oh, amazing.
That's the thing as well. A lot of people, and this is one thing we try to avoid, because of course at heart we're all gamers, so we don't care when it's come out. It could be a 5-year-old game, 10-year-old game, 15-year-old game. If that game is something beloved that we've had, like me and Archie, where we've played 200, 300 plus hours on that game over the years.
Yeah.
We'll go back, regardless of how old it is, we'll go back and play it if they've said, oh, we're coming out and giving you a free enhancement that takes that game 4K, 60 frames a second locked. Yeah, we'll go back and play it.
Sure. I mean, come on. When they re-released the Star Wars movies with the original trilogy with the better special effects and so on, we all went to the cinema and watched it. Obviously, so why shouldn't the same apply for games? I always find that funny that people say just because a game is 10 years old, it's not worth playing it. Hell, one of my most favorite games ever is Secret of Evermore. It is a Super Nintendo title. I play that once a year. For like 25 years now or something like that. 20 years.
Yeah. Well, I was, to be fair, I was the same since PlayStation 1. I've played once through on Final Fantasy VII, either on PC or before it came on the Xbox, PC or mobile or Switch or original PlayStation. I've played Final Fantasy VII at least once every other year since it released, all the way through. So I'm exactly the same on that side. That's just a favorite game. So when I seen the remake was coming out, I was like, ooh. So again, we've got to hope for things like, and there's been so many huge JRPGs that could be brought back. Like you mentioned, Secrets of Evermore. Or it could be Vin's favorite. You'd have to remind us on that one.
Skies of Arcadia, definitely.
Yes, Skies of Arcadia, that he absolutely loves. And obviously seeing there's some massive JRPGs there. And of course, then you've got Xbox's own Lost Odyssey. That's just a sitting IP that did so well. It was, again, another beloved franchise, but it just sat there and hasn't done anything with it. And there's so many possibilities on what can be kind of reborn and brought back up to scratch, and you never know. I think Xbox is probably the best place to bring some of these older titles back, especially into their program, as we've heard from ID at Xbox. Never mind just Game Pass, but ID at Xbox. You've got some of these older titles and getting them working on new consoles, even if you're putting them on there for like £5 or whatever it is, €6. Did sell. The beloved franchises, after all. I think everyone's got to realize that kind of just because something's old doesn't automatically make it bad. And have you looked at anything in that list there, Pat, that really takes your shine? So we'll go through it very quickly before we wrap things up.
No, at the moment there's no other game than Sea of Thieves for me. I'm hooked on Sea of Thieves at the moment. So yeah, I'll be playing that for a while. But I'll definitely gonna take a look at the Game Pass and see what kind of game interests me, and play it. I see some, actually, I'm not a big fan of Doom, but I can remember from years ago when I was younger, I played Doom as well. PC, it was like Minecraft, So, but that's pretty interesting to play it because it's on the Game Pass. So that's so probably one of the titles that triggers me right now, Doom. So, but all because the memories that I have with that game.
The original Doom.
You will be pleasantly surprised. It's so good.
Yeah. I'll bet I will.
100%. And obviously jumping from an old Doom into Doom Eternal, that's a hell of a jump.
I played Eternal a few months ago when it came on the Game Pass. I played it. But like I said, it's not my type of game, but it's interesting to play it. So we'll see.
Yeah. So the games that were announced, of course, the other day were Outriders, Undertale, Yakuza 6, Narita Boy, Empire of Sin, Star Wars Squadrons, Octopath Traveler, Genesis Noir, on PC, Nier Automata, Torchlight, Deadfire, and Superland. And the rest were console and PC or console cloud and PC. That's absolutely massive, of course. Before that, we had then additional, of course, because a lot of them were already in, but additional games going in from Bethesda in there. And then we had, of course, FPS Boost, which has boosted 6 of the Bethesda titles up straight away, including one of them that I'm going to try out for the first time ever because I've never played it yet, which is Prey, followed by Evil Within.
Evil Within also got the FPS Boost.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, I have to re-download that now. I never finished it, actually.
So I'm looking forward to jumping in on them too, but primarily Prey, because it's so as soon as they announced kind of the updates, I think that everyone was just shouting about how good Prey was and how really how much they loved it and how it was probably one of their better games of 2017, if not one in the top 10s. I was like, I've never played it, but I didn't remember it getting such a good reception when it launched either. So,
yeah, I played it when it came for the first time into Game Pass, like 2 years ago, something like that. It wasn't for me. I get why people like it. It wasn't just it just wasn't for me. So what I will be also playing is Dishonored 2. I played the first one. I never played the second one.
Did you see there was a little bug that Digital Foundry had found? I don't know whether or not they've patched it now, but all in French.
Yeah. I've seen that. So weird when stuff like that happens. Yeah, but that's definitely a game that I have. I have always an external drive or multiple external drives on my Xbox. And
mine's just my Series X is hidden behind this cardboard sheet here at the moment because I couldn't have it just sitting where this water bottle is because you'd all see what it was.
I have actually 2 external drives. I have an SSD external and a regular 4 terabyte external drive where I can just store stuff. For a long time storage.
Mainly older unoptimized games.
Yeah, and I call that the my backlog drive. Yeah, so and I downloaded Dishonored 2 and moved it onto that drive. I really want to play it at some point. I enjoyed Dishonored 1. I can't really remember why I didn't start Dishonored 2. I think probably because there were a lot of other releases at the time, and you know how it goes. It's every season the same. You can't just play them all.
Exactly.
So, but now is at the moment it's really the time to go back to the backlog and some of the older titles. Because we haven't had a major release in a while now. I think Outriders is the first bigger release we got this year, right? That will be out on April 1st. So I've been playing a lot of my backlog recently, and of course going back to the older titles that just got the enhancements or now the FPS boost and stuff like that. It's a great time.
Yeah, it's awesome time, and again, it's a perfect time in between large games coming out. Now, I'm fully expecting some of the second-party games that have been announced to release shortly. So don't forget, everybody, we still have Crossfire campaign coming out soon.
Yeah,
we don't know when yet, but very shortly, I would imagine. We also have Second Extinction coming out soon. They've been very active on it. The Ascent, they've been extremely active with showing their game recently as well. So
Psychonauts 2.
Yeah. So there are games coming. Of course, they're not big AAA first-party games, but they're good games and really good games for the console. Of course, all time.
I mean, we don't know about Crossfire X. I'm telling you, it's a Remedy game. Yeah. If we would talk about a Control 2 or something like that, everyone would definitely consider a AAA game.
Yeah.
From what we have seen, it looks impressive. Yeah.
Yes,
we have about a 2-minute gameplay snippet trailer. It looks very impressive. The campaign is developed by Remedy. I mean, come on, how much more AAA can you get? So, and though all those games you just said, they will come out before the fall. These are all spring and summer releases. None of them are coming in the fall. In the fall, we will get a Halo. We will probably get a Forza game, and we will most likely get a Starfield. As the Xbox releases. So all these kind of games that you just mentioned, they come out before the big season starts, and that's why
I've got a funny feeling that there's going to be an event shortly as well. So hopefully, when that event occurs, we shall see something.
Most certainly.
Again, I think it's going to be primarily about some of these games that come out this year that we don't have release dates for yet. Potentially some other titles as well, but I definitely think games like The Gunk, which didn't have a firm release date yet, Psychonauts 2 again, which didn't have a firm release date yet, Crossfire, which again got delayed semi-intentionally, didn't have a didn't have a release date yet because everyone feared Cyberpunk, so everyone was just like, push that back.
That would have been probably the wiser decision, but and then we also have a couple of big third-party games that we know that are coming. Far Cry 5 comes to mind. Yeah, Ubisoft said in their investor call it'll come out in this fiscal year. That means before September.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what's coming up. And again, that was just our small news wrap up on the tail end of this awesome podcast with David Prien today. So if you missed it, of course, make sure you can actually rewind and go right back to the beginning if you've got the time to do so now, and watch the interview with David Prien. It was absolutely awesome to have him on. And obviously, if you're not already following him, follow him. He isn't as active as some of the other execs on here, but again, not all of the executives and directors and things like that are massively gaming kind of forward on Twitter, but awesome guy nonetheless, and some really great kind of insight into what he does and how kind of they work as well, and their decision making process behind everything. So thank you everybody again for joining. Of course, we kind of increased all of the people coming to watch again tonight. We were steady, I think, at one point just shy of 40 people watching at one point there, so that was awesome to get back to those numbers. And hopefully more and more people enjoy and watch the podcast over the next week or so and beyond. But we will wrap it up for today. So first and foremost, we will say our goodbyes and on our wrap-ups to Patcher, if you want to let people know what you're going to be doing over the next week or so and where people can find you. You're muted, I think.
Yes, of course.
Oh, wait, now I can hear you.
What? Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yes,
right.
can you hear me?
Well, I'll be working, of course. Yeah. What? Can you hear me
Yes.
or not? Okay. I got some kind of error in my screen. I don't know what it was, but well, no, I'll be working, of course, this week. Looking forward to this weekend, by the way. A new update for Sea of Thieves. Season 2 is going to start. And they got the double XP goals kind of thing going on. So yeah, I'll be playing that for sure. And Bill, I will stream it as well. Like I lately do a lot. So yeah, and people can find me on Twitter. It's the name right here, but you got the underscore between Petru and the 070. So yeah, make sure follow all these guys, of course, Archimedes and Dutch as well. And if you're not familiar with the channel, put this in the chat right now, my link of my channel, and make sure to hop on the channel and yeah, see you again.
Let's get him to his Twitch partner status. We'll get him up there.
Really appreciate it, guys.
You'll get there. You'll get there.
I hope so.
We'll get you there. They've got so many rules that you need to hit though with Twitch to become affiliate and partner. It's ridiculous.
Well,
I'm going to hit so many hours and viewers and this and that. Yeah. At least with YouTube, I've got 2 things I need to hit.
with Twitch for affiliated, I'm almost there. The only thing I need is like an average viewers of 3.0.
Yeah.
This week I hit the 2.1. So like it's building up. So that's good. But yeah, man, I'm looking forward to make more content. Even I'm gonna send you some clips soon from some gameplay. So yeah,
awesome stuff. And we'll do a nice roundup of these some of the funny parts and things like that. If you don't catch him on his Twitch channel when he's live, we'll do a nice roundup of all the fun action he's been having on Sea of Thieves with the crew, and we'll put that up on the channel as well, so you can watch that. Again, they have some mad stuff happen. Me and Pat have had some mad stuff happen on Sea of Thieves, and we lost quite a bit of loot the other day. That was my fault. But never mind. It was fun anyway. It was fun.
I already forgot that, you know that. There were some even worse things happening after that, so
that's all right then. I'm not the worst. Awesome stuff. Yes, and then finally we will say our goodbyes to Archimedes. Thank you again, brother, for coming along tonight. If you can let people know where they can find you and what you've got coming up.
Yeah, first, thanks for having me on this very special show with David. It was an honor to meet him, and I had a lot of fun talking to him. So yeah, thanks for that. And yeah, basically, people can find me everywhere at Boxenberger. Of course, on Twitter, on Xbox Live, PlayStation Network, and of course here on YouTube. Yeah, I've always have something in mind that I'm working on. I have already a couple of ideas for my next videos. Now I only need to find the time. It's been crazy in between work.
Yeah,
time is really, in between work, family, content creation, and actual gaming. You could think this whole thing is a full-time job.
Yeah.
No, it's but I have a good idea for what is up next on the channel. I know you have something coming up where I was a short part of, or a little part of it.
Yes, indeed.
And yeah, over the next few days, I'm definitely going to play more Gears Tactics. That game has me totally hooked, and I just downloaded the Outer Worlds DLC and booted it up prior to this show for 30, 45 minutes, something like that. Awesome. I'll be definitely playing that. So yeah, again, thanks for having me, and I see you next week.
You're welcome. For those of what was Archie was alluding to there, episode 5 of Know Your Creator is coming out this week, and it is with Archimedes.
Oh, really?
Yes, we eventually sat down.
You guys working together. What the hell did I miss? But okay, now I understand.
Eventually managed to sit down with Archimedes on schedules. It was very last minute, but it was great. We managed to get it done. But yes, that's out. So it's out first of all for patrons all day Friday, so you get to see it a day before everybody else. And then it'll be live again on Saturday, 8 o'clock GMT or 9 o'clock at night for the Europeans. Of course, that means 3 o'clock Eastern for everybody else. But yes, that will be premiered live on Saturday. For everybody else that isn't a Patreon. So if you want to watch it first, become a Patreon. That's the easiest solution.
I will visit Vincent then.
You're going to Vincent to watch it. You've got a workaround that nobody else has. Awesome stuff, brilliant. But no, thanks everybody. I can't mop it. It's sitting right here. I cannot show you the Hellblade console. It is hidden. No, well, Muppet, to be fair, you've seen the design thanks to Patreon. So we'll keep that one quiet until it's released. But yeah, thanks again to everybody who came along tonight. It's been an absolutely awesome show, and thanks for the awesome chat along the way as well. Glad you enjoyed the guest. Of course, that was a big guest to get on directly from Xbox, and I'm so glad he had the time to do so. So we'll see you again on Saturday for the premiere of that new episode. We will see you again next week. So enjoy, guys, and have a nice night.
All right, man. See you guys.
See you guys.